in our society. And what is occurring in Guyana is that the government is making political capital out of the indefensible position of one who is either unemployed or is very close to the line of being unemployed.
I want to say to you all in no uncertain terms that this government is disrespectful to black people. And if people disrespect you, you have a right to disrespect them.
I am saying now that we have started, now that we have come together, do not sleep. Don't let us go back quietly into the night. Protest must be the order of the day.
One race from the same place that make the same trip on the same ship. So we must push one common intention. It's for a better life in the region, for the woman and we children. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean and the Caribbean and the Caribbean.
When we speak of civil liberties and civil rights, people are beginning to understand that the most fundamental of these is the right to work in our society. And what is occurring in Guyana is that the government is making political capital out of the indefensible position of one who is either unemployed or is very close to the line of being unemployed.
I want to say to you all in no uncertain terms that this government is disrespectful to black people. And if people disrespect you, you have a right to disrespect them.
I am saying now that we have started, now that we have come together, do not sleep. Don't let us go back quietly into the night. Protest must be the order of the day.
Rude boys gonna get you by degrees. Here comes the West Indies. And when you're facing the generals, nearly every ball is a funeral. And when we battle, brother, go and put your men on the boundary line. And if you give we a liquor, that is merely a hiccup. Look, you win the little battle, you lose the war. It's the same result every time. Everybody sing, here come the West Indies. Here come the West Indies. Them rude boys gonna get you by degrees. Here come the West Indies. I tell you now, here come the West Indies. Here come the West Indies. Them bad boys gonna bring you to your knees. Here come the West Indies. Special request to the Trinity posse. And what about the Guyana posse? And what about the Jamaica posse?
If you hear black is beautiful, Santa Claus, black is beautiful. It's a textile. Lift your head like me. You got to wear it for with dignity. How it goes on. Black is beautiful. I said, sing it along. Black is beautiful. Say, I'm black and proud. It's my time that we get rid of that old slave mentality.
I clearly remember in my school they used to march me across a stage singing Rule Britannia. But of my ancestry, listen what they taught me. Tarzan ruled the jungles of Africa. So that's why I'm saying, teach your children, Teach the children the truth which they hide. So therefore, Father, they'll see with honor, respect, and pride. Teach them that Africa is where civilization began. Teach them that Africa was the cradle of creation. Teach them ancient Egyptians were all Africans. Teach them that Plato and Socrates taught African philosophies. Teach them that poetry, music, and art was Africa's own from the start. Teach them Africans were the very, very first men to walk on this universe. Teach them. Teach them, teach them. Teach the children. Teach them, teach them. Oh, how they glorified Europe's past in the books they gave me. But they said my people were barbarous, no culture, no history. Africans were savage. We had no heritage until they came and preached Christianity. What a lie. So that's why I'm saying, teach the children the truth they must learn. Who are the vulture, stole our culture and call it their own. Teach them that Africa is the land of King Solomon, who married Makeda, the queen of Sheba, and African. Teach them Christianity belongs to us historically. Teach them Islamic culture came from Axum in Africa. Teach them Bilal of Islam came from Kush, he was Egyptian. Teach them the Holy Quran clearly states that Moses was an African. Teach them. Teach them, teach them. Teach the children. Teach them, teach them. We have been misled, we've been underfed, made slaves and exploited. We all have been fed with lies, Europeanized and taken for granted. But a change is near, I could see the sign. Let's prepare your children and mine to take their rightful place at that point in time. So that's why I'm saying, teach the children the things they never told. Like the contribution by the African to the modern world. But tell them that Africa is not the land that she used to be. Because of the plunder up to this 20th century. Teach them of Mansa Musa, that great African conqueror. Teach them King Minos of old built the first navy in this world. Teach them the year's calendar was first written in Africa. Teach them how Europeans stole and still thief in Africa gold. Teach them. Teach them, teach them. The little children. Teach them, teach them. You gotta teach them. Teach them, teach them. Teach the children. Teach them, teach them. It was the Egyptians who were Cushites that gave the art of writing. Also, the Egyptians who brought to light the skill of shipbuilding. The art of embalming up to this day has never been equaled in any way. But these people were savages, Europe said. That's why I'm saying, teach the children from books of the past. Like the vanquished cities, the great Maccabees, and the Kebra Niggas. Teach them that Africa, as all great historians know, man found his utopia nearly 4 million years ago. Teach them the Akkadian was the first tongue spoken by man. Teach them the Demotic Scroll was the first writings of this world. Teach them pharaohs were Cushites. Poor blacks, not whites. Teach them. Medicine began by Imhotep. He was Egyptian. Teach them.
Teach them, teach them.
Teach the children.
Teach the children.
You gotta teach them.
Teach them, teach them.
African history.
Teach the children.
Teach them for me.
Teach them, teach them.
Teach the children.
Teach the children.
You gotta teach them.
Teach them, teach them.
You gotta teach them.
Teach the children.
Teach them. Teach them.
Teach them, teach them.
You gotta teach them.
I'm the Lord Kitchen.
This is Rootsman.
This is Sanel Dempster.
My name is Winston Bailey, better known as Shadow.
This is Calypsonian Squeezy.
I watch no other but.
Oh, yes. Teach the children, teach the children. Teach the children, teach the children. Welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. A special edition today is going to be WPA Groundings. I have with me WPA co-leader, my co-leader, Tacuma Ogunseye. And of course, our other co-leader of the party is Rohit Kanai. We are going to be chatting this evening about a number of issues. Welcome all of you who are joining us. There's some inquiries about the event on Saturday at the Theatre Guild. I got word that they're trying to make it live. So you most likely, those of you out of the country will get a chance to follow the event live. We are going to carry it live here on Politics 101, so it is likely to be on our page. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to my brother, Vibert White. Good evening to Mr. Thomas Robertson. Mr. Robertson is saying, Dr. Hines, you stand on your square last evening. Oh, the last evening, David versus Goliath. Last evening, as I told you, I was going to be on with Vincent Alexander on Globespan, and I think some of you went across there, and it was quite a show. I got a lot of feedback on it, and we are going to be talking about it, thanks to those of you who tuned in. And of course, you're right. Mr. Robinson said David versus Goliath, educational beating them boys. You know, one of the things that really gets me going is when people take the eyes and pass back people. I don't play, It's like, I don't have to say that I believe in the equality of human being and that I'm not a racist and all of those things, And I just love my race. Why should I not love who I am? And so when you're trying to take your eyes and pass and believe people stupid, that gets me going, And those guys over there, they have an agenda. They have an agenda, and they feel that, our leaders on our side, in the past we have played games. And I'm not playing games. I am not. There are some of us on our side of the fence. We are not playing games. We're not playing games. Those guys are gatekeepers. They're gatekeepers to the PPP. They recognize that they have political power, with the PPP being there. They have economic power. And they want to use that political and economic power to create an Indian-dominated state in Guyana. Brother Yusuf Guyana warned about that 60-odd years ago. And that's their intention. And they realized that in order to create that Indian-dominated state, they have to subdue Black people. And they are on a mission to do that. And that some of us are on a mission to make them not do that. So war break. And that's what we were doing there last night. War break. You are not going to subject black people as far as some of us are concerned. They're accustomed to politicians dancing around this issue. Well, there's no dancing from some of us. There's no dancing. And so, we stick it to them last night, as we have to. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for joining us. We are going to be talking. I'll be chatting with Tacuma Ogunseye, of the co-leader of the Working People's Alliance tonight, and we are going to be dealing with a range of issues, including what they attempted to do last night. Let's look at this clip. Let's look at this clip for a moment.
Here it is. So all I would like to say at this juncture, with this new role that you are playing in terms of being a political party leader, and I was serious when I said that when you talk about being fringe or not, Mr. Koyana called them political sophisticates who tried to whip up sentiments among the Buxton Five. And they created mayhem in Guyana, not only for the surrounding Indian communities, but in Buxton itself. And I would not like to see us descend into such a maelstrom again for the sake of our future being, of blaming others. So I do believe that within the present dispensation, I have spoken about a rational strategy going forward in terms of which it will be incorporated in a political narrative. You are now the leader of a political party. You are now a presidential candidate, right? And who knows how this may grow. You are also, I was very happy to hear that you are now a chief of an African chief. These are all important positions you now hold, which should give you pause in your public utterances that in a plural society that has been fragmented for so long, grievances can be whipped up and you can have extreme action exploding into violence very clearly. I once wrote that after some speeches you made on the east coast of Demerara, after one individual had been killed by the police, and after you made it out to be a racially directed incident. And I pointed out that in Meadowbrook, an Indian individual had been killed by the police in identical circumstances, and that there was a cover-up. That it is not necessarily a racial incident, because the Indian one then was killed also. It might be more of an authoritarian response by a police force that was born out of authoritarianism. So all I would like to say at this junction, with this new role that you are playing in terms of being a political party leader, and I was serious when I said that when you talk about being fringe or not, Mr. Koyana called them political sophisticates who tried to whip up sentiments among the Buxton Five. And they created mayhem in Guyana, not only for the surrounding Indian communities, but in Buxton itself. And I would not like to see us descend into such a maelstrom again for the sake of our future being. That's my vision.
David, a minute.
I would like Ravi to direct some of those remarks, if not all of them, to the PPP government which he defends. I would like him to direct, because they have power. They have institutional power. All I have is the power of my my advocacy. The PPP government has institutional power. Lecture them as you're lecturing me of how they should use power, and then come back to me. Don't talk to me about how I should modulate, and don't talk to them, because my fire is aimed not at you and Beto, at them. Institutional power. Tell them to be careful about what they do. Tell them to be careful about how they use institutional power, and then come back and lecture me. Don't lecture me, and don't lecture those who hold the keys of power in the society. Oh, yes. So that was a little snippet of what took place last night. Good evening, Brother Tacuma.
Good evening, Dr. Hines, and fellow co-leader. We are meeting in a changed situation where both you and myself and Mr. Kanai have real serious responsibilities to the party and the country. So, this is our first meeting on Politics 101 since those decisions.
Tacuma, as you and you looked at the program last night, as you look at that last exchange between Ravidev and myself, unpack for the audience what that exchange, of significance at all, if it was significant at all. Unpack for us the meaning.
Well, I think it was very significant, and I'm glad that you dealt with it very frontally, because their approach is to blame the victim. The PPP beating up on Africans, they're beating up on us, they're doing us all kinds of things, they're using the oil money in all kinds of ways, which is really creating tension in the country, and it's really setting the basis, for an African pushback. They're treating Africans less than citizens. Watch how they're treating the teachers. And those behaviors, which is, as you point out, is institutional. It is power that they have as PPP and as a government, and they're using it, which is creating these problems in the society. And when you or I or others speak to it, we're the problem. But you see what they're afraid of. They know that if the PPP continue the way it is continuing, Africans will have no other alternative but to push back. And they know at some point, I can't say when and how, but they know, they're intelligent enough to know that what the PPP is doing is not sustainable, and that Africans will have no other alternative but to fight back. And when that situation arises, they want to blame you, they want to blame me, and they want to blame the WP for the consequences, not the PPP, who create the conditions, that lead to the response, but they want to blame the victim. And I think that you are very right when you pull them out. Talk to the PPP. Don't come and lecture to black people and black leaders. Lecture to your own leadership, because if they're to be useful to the country and the struggle, they have to pull the PPP in line. When Burnham and the PNC was in charge, and they're beating up on Indians, denying Indians vote and all kinds of things, we Africans were outside there risking our lives. You spend time in jail, I spend time in jail. We didn't ask the Indians to fight Burnham in a certain way, or we didn't tell them not to fight in a certain way. But they now believe that they got a right. You see, that they're operating from a point of arrogance, that they're speaking to the underling, that they could tell Africans and African leadership how we must respond to oppression. We never tell the Indians how to respond to Burnham, whatever response they choose, whether it's from the Indian community collectively or it's from the PPP, even when we disagree with it, and many times we felt the response was too weak. We never even criticize the PPP and the Indians. We accept that they have a right to assess the political culture of their own supporters and their own people, and to work out what's the best way to engage. But these bastards are trying to tell us who are faced with political economic domination. We own less than 10% of the economy. And you tell me that this is an ordinary matter? Deny over 200 years of collective wealth, not a cent. And they watch you in your face and tell you that isn't important. And that got no effect upon your present condition. And the PPP government could go to United Nations and to tell the world that black people in the present situation because we choose to plant provisions and so forth and so forth. I mean, that is the level of disrespect that this country politics has become. And it is so because Africans have to be self-critical. We should have put an end to this long time ago. I don't know why we prolonging it. We are prolonging it to our detriment. And I'm telling you what Rafi Devon is up to. They know, with the Indian domination in the country, economically and politically, if the PPP win the elections for the next 5 years, Africans can't catch up with the Indians perpetually. And that is the space they're opening for the PPP. They want to guarantee that the PPP will win the next elections, and that seal the African fate. And African community and African leaders can't be that dumb and stupid. We have to put an end to this. And you do it through the constitutional struggle, not through elections. We shouldn't be fighting as a people who experience slavery and colonialism and indenture. We should be fighting over elections, fight over governance. I have said to them when they charge me that I am against African domination. I call upon Jagdio and all of them, including Rafi Dev, Ali, Nandalal, all of them to declare that they are against Indian domination. Up to now, they can't answer. And I, the African racists, have declared to me people in the world, I am against African domination in Guyana. I'm yet to hear they declare they're against Indian domination in Guyana.
Brother Tacuma Ogunseye, here tonight.
I've spoken about a rational strategy going forward in terms which it will be incorporated in a political narrative. You are now the leader of a political party. You are now a presidential candidate, right? And who knows how this may grow. You are also, I was very happy to hear that you are now a chief of an African chief. These are all important positions you now hold, which should give you pause in your public utterances that in a plural society that has been fragmented for so long, grievances can be whipped up and you can have extreme action exploding into violence very clearly. I once wrote that after some speeches you made on the east coast of Demerara, after one individual had been killed by the police, and after you made it out to be a racially directed incident. And I pointed out that in Meadowbrook, an Indian individual had been killed by the police in identical circumstances and that there was a cover-up. That it is not necessarily a racial incident because the Indian one then was killed also. It might be more of an authoritarian response by a police force that was born out of authoritarianism. So all I would like to say at this juncture, with this new role that you are playing in terms of being a political party leader, and I was serious when I said that when you talk about being fringe or not, Mr. Koyana called them political sophisticates who tried to whip up sentiments among the Buxton Five. And they created mayhem in Guyana, not only for the surrounding Indian communities, but in Buxton itself. And I would not like to see us descend into such a maelstrom again for the sake of our future being. That's my say, Vishnu.
David, a minute.
I would like Rafi to direct some of those remarks, if not all of them, to the PPP government which he defends. I would like him to direct, because they have power. They have institutional power. All I have is the power of my my advocacy. The PPP government has institutional power. Lecture them as you're lecturing me of how they should use power, and then come back to me. Don't talk to me about how I should modulate, and don't talk to them, because my fire is aimed not at you and Beto, at them. Institutional power. Tell them to be careful about what they do. Tell them to be careful about how they use institutional power, and then come back and lecture me. Don't lecture me, and don't lecture those who hold the keys of power in the society.
No, David,
And there we have it. There we have it.
Before you
but Ogunseye,
yeah,
there must be a reason, because they are, thank God, in the African Guyanese community, we have a plurality of political views. We are not we are a diverse community, and our views, our take on things tend to be very diverse. And there are political forces. There are only political forces. There's the PNC, there's the AFC, there are African organizations, but these people seem to single out the WPA. Help our audience understand why.
You see, look, when Rafi Devodan was very careful not to insert themselves into the Guyanese politics at the height of the civil rebellion, where the WPA and Walter Rodney was very successful in having a multiracial African, multi-class, multiracial masses in the streets of Georgetown and other areas of the country, okay, in what we call the civil rebellion against the PNC and Burnham. They were very careful not to engage, but as soon as Walter was killed and the movement began to, reside, that's where then they intervene. And they intervene, in my judgment, okay, isolating the WPA, and they attack the WPA concept of multiracialism. They don't intervene really attacking the PPP or attacking the system, which has historically denied Indians and Africans and all ethnic groups of a genuine, legitimate narrative. They began by attacking the white people and the system. They isolate the WPA and begin to question the WPA concept of multiracialism and whether the Indian forces, Moses Bhagwan and Comrade Iprans, really represent Indian interests in the WPA. And they begin to, so they isolate the WPA, okay, to discredit the success that the WPA had made in the civil rebellion mobilization. So they were very clear, and from that moment onwards, and I suspect they had underestimated the PPP's reaction to them. And when they began to get the PPP reaction, they were trying to quote the WPA so that there could be some Indian organization that could work with the WPA, which they deem an African organization in their new sense of reality. But when they realized that the WPA would not be going down the kind of road, and while the WPA is tolerant to all sorts of political ideas and tolerant to rural, and even when we disagree, we were not a willing ally. And I think it poisoned the relationship. And if you listen to Dev, he talked about the many hours he spent in Rodney House, many hours he speak to Koyana and Rupnarain, many hours he speak with Moses Bhagwan. Why all of this on the WPA when he could have spoken to the Indians and the PPP? But no, they thought they could have built the empire on the backs of the WPA. And I think because they haven't been able to do that, we are the mortal enemy. Okay? That is a level of organizational relationship. But the bigger problem is that they are committed to Indian domination. And with oil and oil money, okay, and with this, the shift in the geopolitics of the world, they see a possibility here that the PPP and Indian could dominate this thing for the next 40 years. And that is what they want to make sure happen. And they see the WP as being problematic. Because I think they believe that the Indians and the PPP and Rafi, they have them think they got the PNC covered. Because the PNC don't want to deal with these race issues and these, sensitive political issues. But the WPA was birthed in dealing with race and race issues. So it is a territory that's not new to us. We defend Indian interests at the height of African political domination. We went to jail for it. Not one of them go to jail. I haven't seen an Indian activist who go to jail under the PPP, for defending African interests. And yet we the racists. I remember you as a young man working in the Freedom House with the youth group, cultural things and all kind of thing. They like David Hines then. They like Ogunseye when Koyana sent me to speak on the PPP platform with Janet and Chelly, and I sleep in quarantine in New Amsterdam in the PPP mosquito-infested office. They never had even the decency to invite me to sleep, one of the comrades' house or bottom house. I slept over and over in the mosquito-infected office so that the next day and the other days they could go up on the platform, solidarity with them, as an African organization, as a black person, defending Indian and PPP interests, and today they tell me that I against Jagan, I against Indians, and I racist. And I want to say this quickly. I can't be racist because I'm telling you, just after the conflict in the 60s, I remember as a student coming from St. Ambrose Anglican School, we used to jump over the ground from from Alberton right through transport, blah, 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 to Kitty. And one day, I drummed down and the PLA run up in my foot. And I got a gouge, a big coat. The first time I see a mouth on my foot. Blood. I cut across the trench, hustling to get to the market, to my mother. Black people in car drove up and see me, watch me, and they skinned their face. 3, 4 of them. An Indian man on a, what we call at the time, Big Ben bicycle. He stopped. He said, Smalley, where you going? I said, trying to get to the market to my mother. He said, you can't make it. You can't make it. You're bleeding too much. He put me up on the bicycle, rushed me to the Georgetown Hospital, 29 stitches. 3 weeks in hospital. I'm alive today. Black people watch me in my face. I don't forget that. In cars and past me. An Indian man on a Big Ben bicycle. Pick this black child up. Carry me to the hospital. 29 stitches. Weeks in the hospital. Today I'm alive. I could be racial. I'm saying all of this because you see in this country, we play with this thing about race. I have my mother happened to find out where the man lived in Liliendal. And she went to Liliendal looking for him to thank him for what he did. People in the area said the man there, the man racial, in the racial time, you run black people with cutlass. And when the man, months after racial crisis, see a black child coming down Vicinjan Road by the, heading by the army's thing there, say, black boy, you can't make it to the market. Put me on your bicycle, save me life. I could be racial. But anyway, that is just by the way. But I mean, that, and a lot of them, and I'm telling you, some of the, look, Rafi Dev, I have had a lot of respect for Rafi Dev and Ro when they enter into the equation. Because I think they had brought some, even you disagree with them, you had a sense that you think they're trying to deal honestly with the race problem. And I remember in Agda, me and a lot of us was very tolerant. And a lot of people in Agda love Rafi and love Aurora because they felt that, look, we in Askria, in Agda, had a certain African view. And it was good to hear an Indian organization articulating an Indian view and questioning, the political establishment and even questioning multiracial politics, whether it could work or not. So, and we had a number of exchanges between me and him in the press. And I always felt they were healthy. But then over time, I began to sense that Rafi and them are very dishonest and dishonorable people. And the final straw with me and he is after my Buxton speech, which they charged me. He wrote that I said that the army and the police must turn the guns upon Indian people. Now, Rafi is an intellectual. I'm a market man. He is trained in research. He knows the basic. He knows in politics. He can't let the government or the papers lead on that. And the speech was on the web, and it's still on the web. And he could have, and I know he went to the speech. I know he heard it, but he decided to be nasty, racially and class. I'm telling you, if Clive Thomas had made a speech, he would have been careful to make sure before he criticized Clive to hear what Clive said. But Ogun is a market man, a non-entity, a working class person. Therefore, you don't have to treat him with any due respect. No equality. It's the same thing. I haven't spoke about the Indians in the PNC and others who you quite correctly call house slaves. No, we are comrades fighting the PPP. You call slave catchers. Sorry, we are all comrades. You know the PPP control the press. You know they behave. The first thing you gotta do if you're a comrade, look, I got to hear what we're going to say. I got to hear the speech myself. But no, they jump on the bandwagon and they attack me because they feel they deal with a non-entity. It's a market man, a working class person. Then they accuse the WP of being an intellectual party. And when they face with the organic, historic WPA working class people, they can't deal with me. They can't deal with it. And the big problem in this country is that the WPA, have survived mainly on working class or energies, and we have survived, and they say we're dead, and all of a sudden they find we very much alive. Finally, on Rafi Dev, he haven't up to now made an apology. And I remember Koyana in his speech to the 1st of August symposium went out of his way to remind Rafi that he misquoted him, and he had the decency to correct himself. And finally, I want to say, and I wrote it, and I've said it in the public streets at the street corner, that I salute Nascimento. Yeah, Nascimento, he's not somebody, in politics, my favorite, but Nascimento had the decency to write that, look, he listened to the speech, and he transcribed the speech, and he said the things that they're saying, Ogunseye didn't say so. I mean, that's the kind of integrity. When they agree with a person politically, when people demonstrate that level of integrity, you have to respect them. And I have no respect for Rafi. It have gone until he apologized. He's being nasty.
Tacuma Ogunseye, Working People's Alliance co-leader tonight, on fire. They say, Tacuma, as you know, I confronted them last night because in a letter they describe us as fringe elements. But there they were sitting, dissecting what we said. My speech on the East Coast after Quindon Bacchus was murdered, they keep going back to that speech. Going back to a speech I gave at, I think, Victoria, when I said, undermine the government. They keep dissecting the speech. On the one hand, they're saying, we are fringe, we are not. But on the other hand, they're saying that we have the capacity to influence people. Talk to that.
But they're right. We do have the capacity to influence people. And we have the capacity to influence people in a major way. I'm telling you, throughout the history of WP, at the point of our strongest point, we had influenced people. Even before the civil rebellion, we influenced and we began to shape the politics with Askri and IPRA and so forth and so forth. And from then onwards, WPF shaped the politics. We shape or we make the APMU. We have the PNC to come back to power. We shape the politics in the PCD, have Jagan to come and the PP to come to power. We have always been playing a role in shaping the politics one way or the other. And everybody in this country know that the little sanity that may be remaining in this country in a big way remain because of the presence of the WP and the articulation of the WP. And I'm telling you, the way the WP throw its weight, when it decides to throw its weight, it's going to be decisive and transformative. And we have to act, we have to throw our weight very quickly in this equation. So they're right. They're reading us right. They know, despite all the talk about WPA dead and all kinds of things, they know that we're very much alive. Rafi, them and them, they study us and they study the society. And they know the force that could change all of this very quickly is the WPA, where the WPA throws its weight.
Tacuma, the WPA recently announced office bearers, presidential candidate, and they have been talking about policies and so forth. Give our audience a sense of how you arrived at that point, because obviously it's not something that happened overnight.
No, the WPA, as all political parties, have had to be examining itself. I had to be very self-critical, look at its possible future, look at its role and its usefulness to the country. And we've had to be, and particularly after the way in which the coalition government, ended, and all the controversy surrounding it and so forth and so forth, the WPA, began very quick soon after that a long process of self-examination and to try to understand the importance of the changing reality with the coming of oil. And luckily, we had Brother Clive Thomas, who is an expert, economic expert, and the expert in oil, to give us guidance and to point to that the politics of the country have transformed and so forth. And in the context of that, we set out a 3-year process of re-examining the party and trying to reposition the party to make it useful, to make it survive. Because you can't be useful to the country if you don't survive. And all of them saying we dead and the wishing we dead. So our first duty was to ourselves is to survive as an organization. And once we survive, to use the survival to the best interest of the country, and more particularly, the best interest of the multiracial poor and powerless in the country. Because that is our mandate. And that ain't change. And it's in the context of that we begin to look how we're going to reorganize the party and reposition the party in the new reality. So we had to look at the question of elections and electoral politics. The WPA for many years have been a funny position. We contest at least 2 or 3 elections with the PNC in the APMU, and then in the APMU plus AFC. Now, every time we contest an election in a coalition, we rob ourselves of building the electoral history of the party. The big party, the PNC, them, whatever format they decide to go into the elections, history is on the side, everybody knows the strength, and they don't lose nothing from engaging in coalition politics. Smaller parties like ourselves, when we spend 10 or 15 years in coalition politics, with a set of partners who treat you as a 1-2% party, then you got to ask yourself what future you have as a party in the arrangement. So the WPA have had to look at all of these things and say, look, we're committed to coalition politics. The country future lies in coalition politics. We're more likely to have to go down the road, even though we believe there should be a constitutional struggle before elections. But anyway, we talk about elections. And therefore, the party has to prepare itself, not only for these elections, but for its party electoral survival after the elections, because the election is just a moment. Party have to build, and we felt that this time we do it different. We're not going back in the APMU and be subject to the dictates of the PNC and the PNC leader or leadership, whoever that person may be. We want a relationship with them like what they had with the AFC. We negotiate, okay, our accord with you, okay, and we could do business from there. Okay, and we decide this time we have to act like an electoral party. Before we were part of the APMU, therefore we were a constituent part of that. So we couldn't act independently of that. This time we decided to act like a legitimate electoral party, name our presidential candidate, name leadership, and begin to organize for elections. If we got to go by ourselves, we prefer to go in a coalition, but whatever is thrown on us as a political electoral party, we will have to respond. I mean, we're all hoping that political sense prevail in the opposition ranks, and that we have a grand coalition against them if we decide to go to elections. But there's a part of the WPA who is weary with elections, because elections are a racial census in Guyana. It solves little or nothing. And some of us believe the electoral struggle is more, the constitutional struggle at this point is more important than the elections. But we can't decide where the country will go, the balance of forces in the country. If the balance of forces throw us straight into elections, we will be in a position where we will not want to divide the opposition, and we more likely have to go with that. But we want Guyanese to know that is not our first choice. Our first choice is to fix the constitution, get power sharing, so at the end of the day, when we vote race or we don't vote partisan, the constitution says you all got to sit down together and run this country from the executive together. We feel that makes more sense, bearing in mind the threats that this country faces, being an oil-producing state and a country faced with a major border change. A lot of foreigners, Venezuelans and Brazilians, are coming to Guyana. In the next 10 or 15 years, you may have more Venezuelans in this country. You could have more than Guyanese, Africans and Indians. And while Africans and Indians play the fool on the coast of the country, right before our eyes, okay, the country could be taken away from us. And we believe that having a political compromise in the form of shared governance is the best way to guarantee the national patronage and to make sure that Guyanese could benefit from the country. And we're worried that our national leaders in the major political parties seems not to understand what we faced with. We're not just faced with PNC, PPP problem or African Indian problem. We're faced with a possibility that given the logic of oil, that the whole country will change, the population will change, and with that the politics. That is what facing us, our very existence as a country as we know it. And our politics are directed both short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And that is why we invest in a collective leadership in the party, and not a one-man leadership. So the one-man dead will happen. If I drop down and dead, it doesn't matter. You got two other co-leaders. And that is the things that guide us. And none of this is really new to the WPA. Those are fundamental foundation policy position, but because of the nature of the political discourse in Guyana, you could hardly get a space to discuss anything properly.
Tacuma, we don't do polls in Guyana. We, I guess political parties, the big political parties, they do internal polls, which they don't share with the public. So one doesn't get a sense of where parties like ours, the quote-unquote smaller parties, the kind of support that we may have in the wider society. But outside of polls, people live in the society, you move around the society, you hear people, and now with this social media thing, we get people on these programs, and people express their views and their preferences and so on. Does the WPA have a sense of whether its message is taking some root in sections of the society?
I say yes. We have had historically a problem. For whatever reason, after the demise of Walter and after 92, when we invest a lot, into the PCD and trying to get, United National response to the elections, and when the Americans called Jagan up to Washington and tell him that, look, they've removed their objections to him. In Guyana, the DLM have made popular with the political problematic. And the political problematic for them was the PPP problem with the Americans and so. But I was the WPA main person who used to meet with the PPP at the PCD meetings. And I remember when Jagan was leaving to go to the meeting with the State Department, he told us, and I remember when he came back, he was a different Jagan, And I suspect, he didn't tell us, but I suspected that the Americans have removed, the objections to him. The very next meeting, Jagan didn't attend the PCD meetings because he never used to miss no PCD steering committee meeting. And from then onwards, he never attended a PPP steering committee. And when the negotiations started, and he felt that it didn't go in the way the PP want, he stopped participating with it, and he gave Nagamutu the responsibility to deal with the PCD people, and Nagamutu came with a hard line. But the point I'm trying to make is that once the Americans have said to Chedi, look, it's the end of the Cold War, we ain't got no problem with you. Jadigan had no need for the PCD. He just know that he could forget about the PCD, forget about the historical allies, go and look for Guard and other people, who never fight with he and who never care nothing, but he know he gonna win because he got the numbers, and that was important. And that's how he decided to solve his problem. And it proved right, the PAP win, but where leave the country? Where leave the country? And he said he recognized what happened, and that at the next elections he corrected, but he died before. Height said he comes to share governance soon after he died too. Jagan and Burnham was discussing, some, solution in the context of the change in the reality of the international politics. Burnham did. Height continued the discussion. So we have been victims to all of these scenarios. But the point I'm making is that, and that is why experience is important. I hear Jagdio talking about WPA brings out old people. But there's a problem. They like to deal with young people who have no history of the politics of the country. Jagdio, Nandalal, and them, and Ali. When I was fighting with Jagan and the PPP, where was them? They weren't involved in no politics. They never spent one day in the lockup. If Jagdio could point to me that he spent time in any police lockup, I will withdraw this statement. But those are people who have never sacrificed for nothing. And they get power, they ride on the backs of people who have fought and set the foundation, for the PPP to come back into power and to get the fair and free elections, blah, 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 blah. And then once they get power, the hell was anybody else. And they become very contemptuous and arrogant with the power. And that is what the problem I have with them. I don't have no problem with them because they represent Indians. Indians need political representation, or Africa needs political representation. That has never been a problem for us in WP. But it's how you use your power. That is the issue.
Yeah. And I was asking whether there's a sense in the WPA.
Yes. Sorry, I get distracted.
Correct. Right.
Yeah. No, the point was, I was making a point that we had suffered for many, many years, over nearly almost 2 decades, of being flushed out of the mainstream press for various reasons. I really can't fully, explain, but the WPA had no significant access in the mainstream medias to promote a consistent WPA line. And we were faced with this situation when we even enter into polemics with people, the editor choose to have 6 people attack you, give you 2 shots, and then close out the discourse. So you never had we always suffer from not being able to get sufficient exposure in the conventional media. Then come COVID, and then come this new media. And I'm telling you, this new media that you, Kodaki, and others have been able to use have liberated the WPA from isolation. And the WPA message today is more accessible to the Guyanese population in a consistent way and a greater way, even when Walter was there. Walter never had a day-to-day access media to the Guyanese population. What you all have now is a day-to-day, 6 days a week, addressing the country and addressing the constituents, never the history of the country. The WPA have had that option. And we're using it, and you all are using it to our best advantage. That's what worry them. We're no longer isolated. On the ground, the WPA is a major force. I'm telling you, the WPA at some point in this equation will demonstrate what we mean when we say we got strength on the ground. So our message is getting through to our constituents. It's also getting through to the Indians, you know. A lot of Indians listen to these programs. A lot of Indians meet me on the road and they stop me and they give a good thumbs up and so. And don't believe that they're not following the argument. And don't believe that they don't have a sense of history. Unlike Jagdeo, Nandalal, and them, and Ali who have no sense of history, just comers, there are people in the Indian community with a sense of history. They know when the Indians were in trouble, who stood by them, who went to jail on the behalf of them in the struggle. I am yet to see an Indian person go to jail fighting the PPP for me or the African cause. And yet they call me racist. But I like to be the kind of racist. I satisfy. I don't have no problem. I'm a proud racist from that point of view.
Tacuma Ogunseye here tonight, co-leader of the Working People's Alliance, talking about the contemporary politics and talking about the WPA, the Working People's Alliance. You know, Tacuma, a couple of weeks, last week or the week before, I had cause to go to a place that we don't normally go, you know. Somebody raised the question about the WPA died when Walter Rodney died. And I had to point out that when Walter Rodney died, we weren't even a proper political party. Right. It was after Walter died that we really built up our party. And you and I and a whole bunch of us were out there building open up party offices around the country and so forth. And so that thing that the WPA died when Walter died is such a myth. But people hear it and they repeat it and they repeat it. I made the point that when Walter died, the movement suffered. The movement suffered. But the party that he left behind was able to use the momentum that he left to build the party.
Yeah.
You know, comment on that.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. Anybody who knows history knows that is totally true. In fact, it is after Walter we closed down, we call on 2 occasions, and I remember one was the food crisis, closed down the country.
1983.
Yeah, you know, so
a day of rest. So we call 2 days of rest.
Yeah. You know, so the party after Walter's death, you know, in fact, organized itself and moved from what people want to call a pressure group. I don't like the term pressure group because they were more than a pressure group. But anyway, to a more structured party because the dynamics of the civil rebellion and the speed in which things develop didn't give us a chance to develop in a normal way. Okay? But after Walter's death and there was a lull in the engagement, we got a chance to use that period, okay, to strengthen and to organize the party. And the party became, what killed the party is not after Walter's death. What if we're talking about the movements of in a big way after Walter's death? Okay, but not the party was more resolved. And the party, you know, at some point, we got to get a program for talk to some of these Walter things. Anyway, but the party was more resolved. What killed the party, if you want to say WPA get wiped out, is the 92, the elections immediately after the return of quote-unquote democracy. 92 was elections or 93? It was 92.
92.
Right? It is that elections where the country polarized. I remember going up to the elections, either Hoyt or Chedi had said that the country would like to see, and I'm not quoting the exact words, would like to see, okay, a runoff between Jagan and Hoyt. I can't remember which one used the term. And the other one responds, let go with it. And I remember Kwehana telling me that, you know, this here going to polarize this country. Because what they're actually telling the people, that this elections is a race between the African Hoyt and the Indian Jagan. And they have formed it into a clear racial battle. but it is the 92 elections. You see, all the political observers felt that the WPA would do very well in those elections. Some people were even predicting that we could win those elections. Okay, I remember there are activists in the party, both African and Indians, who really thought the WPA could win those elections. And I remember talking to the UC, and he said, "Oh, gee, I mean, there's a lot of optimism in the party about winning the elections." And so I said, he said, the comrades doesn't understand race politics. He said, I am not that optimistic, but I can use my presence to say these things to younger people. We got to allow them to have their own experience. Okay? But we in Askria had the discussions, and we know that this thing is not as straightforward as it looks. But anyway, in the elections, you have to promote yourself as a possible winner and do good. But when the results came out and WPA get less than 2% of the votes, that is what really began the destruction in WPA, if you want to talk about destruction. And I remember being in the meeting before the elections at Kitty Market. We got hundreds of African and Indians hugging up. When WPA win, all races win, blah, 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 blah. The next morning, election morning, I go walking around Kitty watching the polling stations. And I'm watching these people directly in the eyes, the dung in the face, both African and Indians. I said, we get cocky. and I knew that, not even what Koyana told me, but I'm going to tell her experience. My daughter, she was in primary school. And she run home a day. Daddy, she go want to come one speed. I said, what happened? We had the election, the class teacher had the elections. I said, hold on. I said, what happened? And we vote. I said, tell me something about the thing. How much Indians you got and how much Africans you got in the class? And she gave me some idea. Anyway, at the end of the day, she said, at the elections, it's only me vote for WPA. So that thing, I'm not quiet, tell me, that thing was very much. So when I walking down election day, I then polling booth and I see African and Indian down in the face. Because normally, if you're in a constituency, if people vote for you, just give a thumbs here, they shake their head and say a thumbs up, say, we there here. But these bars, these people down their head. And I know we're in trouble. And when the results come, I in the market there. Indians coming to me at the stand. I'm going to say, I ain't vote for y'all because I thought them black people would vote for y'all. I said vote for the PVP so we could get more votes. And then the black ones coming, so I ain't vote for y'all. I thought them Indians would vote for y'all, so I vote for the PNC. So the multiracial constituency polarized and get wiped out. And once that gets wiped out and get hit that hard, we have never recovered up to now. After umpteen years from 92. In fact, it have got worse, and the multiracial constituency is strong, which make it almost impossible to engage in a traditional multiracial politics as we engaged in the late 70s and the early 80s. So you got to modify to the objective reality. And Roar and Rafi Dev helped to consolidate the negative racial reflexes in the country. Why, as they said, the PPP was giving the Indians a Marxist ideology. They come and give them an ethnic ideology to justify support for the PPP. And there's no self-criticism of them. That's why, look, we here polarize this country, and let me start from a self-criticism, But they want a joint narrative after umpteen years of saying that WPA can't speak for Indians and black people in the WPA can't speak for Indians. And I remember, out of respect for Rafidev and Roar and the Indian community, after I saw the consistent electoral behavior where Indians continue to vote for the Indian party, Africans continue to vote for the African party, I accept politically the soundness of Rafidev logic to some extent. And I wrote publicly that I will end my articulation of a multiracial thing, and I'm going to restrict my articulation to the African community in respect, of the view about Indian thinkers that African leaders can't speak for Indians. I said it publicly, and then I shift my position, and I continue to articulate from my African position. And 3 years ago, with the Aventa oil, and Clive teaching us about the complications and the possibilities of oil. I wrote in the papers that I readjust my utterances in the interest of the nation and to defend the national country against the external vultures, that it become important for African Indians, to speak with a common voice. And I end my narrative of speaking mainly for Africans. None of them, one of them wrote making joke out of it. But I mean, that is my public in the public records. But they don't go to those things because they engage in war propaganda. They want to destroy Ogunseye, want to destroy the WP. They want to promote an environment in the country that helps the PPP to consolidate Indian domination, and they're playing a high risky game. Because I'm telling you, look, man, I deal with young African people. And a lot of young Africans say, Ogun, why is it all the business in the country is owned by Indians? Oh, black people don't own nothing. Now, me tell them nothing. These are young people who look in the objective reality around themselves, and they see why all of these businesses is owned by black people and got no business. It is the objective condition which is fashioning their consciousness. And they tell me, look, when you talk about public protests and stuff, they say, man, we willing to come with the protests, but they're going to use them police and them soldiers to shoot we down. We want brothers and sisters they're going to use to shoot we down. That is the discourse in the African community. That is the level of oppression. That is the level to which they oppress us. That we are afraid of our own children. And look, I'm in court on this matter. And I don't know the parameters of how far you could speak on some of these matters when you're in court, and I don't want to embarrass the counsel of the court, say you show contempt for court. But everybody knows any part of the world where there's a public, we don't go far. A couple of years ago, when we had a protest from the Square of the Revolution going down Hatfield Street, myself, Brigadier Collins, and so was in front. They sent out the riot police. 90% of them were black people. Guns point to us. When we advance, we move forward. The young men watching me, we watch them in the face, move backwards. We move forward, they move backwards. And then the commanding officer says, shoot. They respond. The story continues. We advance, they move back. A second time, he says, shoot. I see the young man hand trembling. We keeping the eyes upon the face. And then suddenly he shoots upon the ground. When he shoots on the ground, they start to spray us with bullets, with rubber bullets and so. Broke up the thing, shoot you left, right, and center. I don't know if Jack Dio ever had Indian police or soldiers shooting at he in Ali and Nandalal. But that is my experience under the PPP. The same thing I experienced, remember at the Linden at the bridge?
Yes.
When they open fire, we didn't know Linden. If it wasn't for the Lindeners helping people navigate those bullets and get me to safety, some of you might be killed. And that is under the PPP. I never experienced that under Burnham. So the point I'm making that every government or every dictatorship or every authoritarian regime bring some different behavior to the table. And you have to deal with the behavior you're confronted with. And I'm telling you, Indians talk about the PPP, the PNC rig elections and kill them out of power. But throughout those rigging elections, the WPA black people, we stand with them. We condemn Burnham. Up to now, black people doesn't forgive us for that. Black people are not sophisticated enough to understand, and doing that, we're defending African dignity. And if we didn't do that, they could say the whole African race was for rig elections and anti-democracy. But they can't say it. History will show that an important section of the African community fought against rig elections, defend the Indian rights and PPP rights. And now, and we did it, conscious that the PPP is engaged in rigging elections, because the PPP had developed a rigging machinery to rig to get back the votes that the PNC thief from them. And we all know that that's how they used to do. But we shut them out because we say, all right, they're rigging to get back votes that they lost. But when they get power, no, that reggae machine turned against me. You know, and they benefit from the narrative that only PNC are riggers. And they're also riggers. And they've always been rigging, and they have developed rigging machinery. But that did not become a major part of the national discourse, because the big discourse was the PNC and Burnham who was in power. You know, so there's a lot of things we need to discuss in this country, very open and frank. You know, so I have to respond to any government the way I find the government respond to the population, respond to me. Just because we got issues with the coalition government, I had issues with Burnham government, I had issues with Hyde government, I had issues, okay, with Chedi government, okay, and I have issues with coalition government. Because we're in politics. And the nature of politics is that you have to live with these things. But what you expect is an honest articulation and discussion of problems, you know, with a level of genuine. We know politics, they say, always got a level of low bowling and so. But you want to make sure your politics doesn't go too low. That still some morality influence your politics, you know, and you have to start with honest political discourse. You have to state problems as you see it. Just saying that there's no race problem when everybody knows the race problem in the country. All the young people stop you and they mentioning it, and they got all kinds of solutions to it. I remember when we had the problem with the extrajudicial killings. The police always used to kill people. It started with the Burnham regime. I remember I was in Christchurch school. In those days, the police used to walk in the colonial with a baton. And then the big crime was pickpocket and snatching. And to deal with that, Burnham armed the police with revolvers. And the police began to carry revolvers. As the consequence of carrying the revolvers, a lot of young lumping elements got shot and so on and so on and so on. So the state, so you had in the police the development of the other phenomena. And I remember when the PP came to power, after they were faced with the African protests with the nurses and everything that went there, and the role that the lumping elements played, because, you know, in the political reality of Guyana, is that the PPP always get the support of the lumping, rural lumping, to support the sugar workers, and whatever political action the PP wanted in the rural areas, it was supported by the lumping and the other supporters. In Georgetown, the same thing, PNC supporters and the African lumping in the city. And that is the political reality. But when the PP came to power, because of the sensitivity of the city and so, and the role of the African lump, they decided to encourage the police, okay, to shoot and to terrorize African lumping to a point where that you could depoliticalize them. And it backfired. And you had a reign of political killings by the police, unprecedented in the history of the country under the PPP regime. And I remember we have had, as African organizations, we had marches. We wrote jargon on this matter. We do all kinds of, we wrote the United Nations on the matter, warning that this thing here going to lead to problems. You can't be shooting at the people, whether it's black people, Indian people, or Amerindian people, whether the state encourage the police or the army. You shoot at people, at some point people will get vexed and shoot back at you. Even if they got to use the arrow and bow, or they got to use slingshot, they're going to shoot back at you. There's the logic of that kind of thing. And I remember in the debate about the extradition killings, I have wrote a lot on it. I even had problems with the human rights groups to make the argument that a lot of these problems are institutional. But right under the PPP now, they got extradition killings to the extent. If it is institutionally policed to the extent that the police is so rogue, it would not have stopped under the PPP after the reactions. It would not have stopped under the coalition government. It would not have stopped right now. The level of extradition killed by the police almost stopped. And if it was just simply an institutional problem, it would have continued. But it was an institutional problem, okay, that was encouraged by political leaders in the PPP government as a weapon against black people and against the PNC, and it backfired. But Rafi Dev and them ain't gonna make that kind of analysis. All they're gonna concern is that black people behave bad, black people do this, and black people do.
Brother Tacuma Ogunseye, co-leader of the WPA, saying it as he says it, straight. Brother Tacuma, we've gone for more than an hour and a half. Your closing thoughts.
Well, I want to end by saying that we are at a very critical point in the country's history, both as an African community, as a political opposition, and as a nation. The challenges facing Guyana, as much as it is centered between African Indians, PPP, PNC, is bigger than that. The very survival of the country, now we become an oil state, the very fact that we faced with a hostile neighbor, and all kinds of things pose some serious challenges to the survival of the country. And it requires a lot of political maturity in the context of oil, not to be tempted by oil money, to engage in political recklessness like what the PVP is doing. They're using oil money and the temptation of oil money to be political reckless. But I want to tell them, if they continue to doing what they're doing to African people, and Venezuela cross the border, you think the Africans are going to go to the border? They're going to refuse to go to the border. I mean, and I'm saying it, I know they're going to charge me again. But I'm saying it, you got to be realistic. You can't treat a major party society in a certain way. And when trouble come, think you're going to instruct them, they're going to put their life down, and they're going to willfully go in, yes, master, we got to get killed. I mean, so these are fundamental problems. We have an inflow of people coming in. I hear there was over 150,000, Venezuelans and Brazilians and all in the country. Imagine what happens in the next 5 years. Soon African and Indians going to find themselves as a minority in the country. And I want to warn Indians, the Indian leaders who seem to be very short-sighted in this whole dynamics of domination and the economy. You see what the Chinese have done to Indian commerce? Wipe it out. And with this oil economy, when the Europeans bring in the multinational businesses, they're going to wipe out the Indian so-called dominance. If India got 60% of the economy, I'm telling you, with the expansion of the economy and oil and stuff, they're not going to be wiped out by the external forces. And then they're going to need Africans now for us to have a united national front against these hostile forces. And what will happen at that time? You're so divided and disunited that you have no unity. So any force, any government that got any sense in the Indian community must know that their economic domination at present, even 60% of the economy, whatever it is, okay, given the size of the economy now, and given the potential size of the economy over time, and the new economic forces are going to enter the economic fray, that 60% is going to be wiped out very quickly. So, they may be holding on to something that soon they may realize you're holding on to nothing.
Yes. And on that issue of the Chinese, one of my Indian friends called me the other day and he said, David, why you're not doing a show on the Chinese takeover of the business sector? I said, who they taking it over from? He said, well, it's not them coolie people business. I said, well, when African people got their problems, those Indian businessmen don't defend us. They don't stand up for us. Why you want me to stand up for Indian businesses that are being decimated by Chinese?
And they run the places with the Chinese with big money.
That's right.
They contribute to their own destruction.
That's right. So, our Indian comrades, our Indian brothers, because as I pointed out last night, when we talk about power sharing, we're not talking about sharing power with cats and dogs.
Yeah.
We talk about sharing power with our Indian brothers and sisters.
Yes, and our Amerindian brothers and
sisters. Amerindian brothers and sisters. That's what we're talking about. So in the African narrative, it's not just a narrative about us. We also have a national narrative. And they don't want to acknowledge that because Ravidev and them have backed away from the national narrative.
Oil, man, oil. You see, oil and
Oil.
the dominant. You see, Rafi, they know that if the PPP is able to hold on to one more term with this oil money, game done for we. They know it. And they're trying to disarm us. And they're trying to have us engage in elections, which could go either way. But I'm saying I'm old. And I don't want to gamble, me a gambler. I want to tell African people, be played safe. We ain't greedy. We always want half of this power. You keep half, we keep half. And we can live happy.
Thank you very much, Brother Ogunseye. And you've really lighted up here tonight. As the young people say, stay woke. Thank you very much, my brother. And to you, our audience, what can I say? What can I say? We're going to be back tomorrow night, where we continue to fight. Fight, fight, fight. The reason they're singling us out is because we are fighting. If you don't fight, they don't pay attention to you. And they know that we are fighting. They know that our fight is resonating, is resonating, is resonating. We come back tomorrow night, where we continue the struggle, because this struggle is real. And this struggle is a struggle to stay alive in this country that we have to build. Stay woke.
When we speak of civil liberties and civil rights, people are beginning to understand that the most fundamental of these is the right to work in our society. And what is occurring in Guyana is that the government is making political capital out of the indefensible position of one who is either unemployed or is very close to the line of being unemployed.
I want to say to you,